So I'm here with Sara today making a video. We met at an expo in Sydney last time I was here, very briefly, and we were chatting about mental health. As you guys know, I did a degree in mental health last year and I'm super interested in it. And Sara has kindly agreed to share her story, or a bit about her story, with her beautiful daughter. And yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Sara and I am a nutritionist on the Central Coast, and I focus in postpartum mental health mainly due to the experience that I've had before with my daughter. And I am training to be a doula, and yeah, basically just doing all the nutrition with babies and mother care and making sure that they're really well supported. And yeah, so we're just talking about mental health today, and I'm happy to share a bit about my own journey with mental health and postpartum and that whole experience. So I was diagnosed with postnatal psychosis, and it's 1 to 2 in 1,000 women actually diagnosed with that one. And yeah, so we just wanted to talk today about, we've obviously just chatted, and Sarah's kind of shared her story with me, and it's so interesting. And I know that we were saying, like, it is rare, 1 in 1,000, but also the amount of women that have babies every single day, it's actually not that rare, and it's something that needs to be talked about more, because it's something that a lot of people don't know about. Everyone knows about postnatal depression, but no one necessarily knows about full-blown postnatal psychosis and what that is and what the symptoms are and what can be done and all of that. So we were just chatting about that, and Poppy. Poppy is 2, or almost 2. Yeah, almost 2.
Almost 2. And so Sara went through an incredible journey of mental health, and it's something that you didn't experience, or you hadn't experienced any mental health issues in pregnancy. So it was all afterwards that it started. So when did it start?
So it was about 4 weeks postpartum. We had a little bit of stress when Poppy was born, and we had a lot of sleep deprivation because she was born with 2 holes in her heart. So we spent a lot of time in hospital, in special care, and were sent home with a lot of stress. It sort of started about 4 weeks was the alarm bells of psychosis. A lot of sleep deprivation, a lot of stress, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety started coming in, and I pretty much lost who I was mentally and physically. I remember standing in my own street holding our baby and not knowing where I was, and not knowing how to get home. I was not in a good way. I didn't know what year it was, didn't know who people were, couldn't feed myself or walk or dress myself or do anything. Basically the brain just went into complete overdrive and shut down after a really stressful time. And I think that sleep deprivation is one of the leading causes of postpartum psychosis, along with a lot of stress and becoming a new mum and balancing hormones and all the things that come with
and the
motherhood and the birth.
Birth can definitely set it off.
Yeah, so we had a pretty traumatic birth. It was a really quick birth, so it was 2.5 hours, and we had the cord snap at birth. So there was a lot of blood loss there as well. So as the body's trying to reaccumulate and readjust to itself, also trying to be a
raging hormones and
raging hormones and baby blues and milk coming in, and all of it was a combination of how I ended up with postpartum psychosis. So I was fortunately lucky that my mum did call an ambulance and that I was admitted into a hospital, and it took about 6 or 7 hours for them to formally diagnosed me with psychosis. After a lot of questions, I didn't have any control over my voice. I could only write on journal and actually write what I was feeling and how I was feeling. They kept asking questions like, what year is it in? What year are we in? And what year is Poppy born? What month? What day? Just simple questions. Can you count to 10 even? I just didn't have any recognition of anything. So they admitted me into mental hospital for 3.5 weeks, and that was a big journey. We were in with everyone, so depression, anxiety. There wasn't a postpartum wing. I didn't have Poppy with me at the time. I was still recovering from birth and also focusing on how am I going to be a mum when my brain physically can't work or control my body. So Jake, my husband, basically raised Poppy for the first 4 weeks of her life. and came to the hospital and visited us every day. He's an amazing man. He's really held it together for us. And we were able to breastfeed Poppy each day at the hospital when she visited, just to remain that mother-baby bond and make sure that wasn't destroyed. I didn't have any thoughts of harming my baby or harming myself during that time. It was just that I was very scattered.
Yeah, which can be very common. Like often, every other case I've seen of postnatal psychosis has been women who the diagnosis has basically come from them saying, you know, I want to either hurt myself or kill myself or my baby. So that's, you know, you can not count your blessings, but at least that's one thing that's really amazing, to be able to have that bond still with Poppy, and want to be around her and not feel negative things towards her, while your own brain was trying to work out what the hell was going on.
And it is very common, like what Aliza was just saying, is that you do get those feelings of like wanting to hurt your baby, but luckily I didn't actually have that, which was good. So I was still able to keep the bond. I was just really fearful that I was going to hurt my baby while I was holding her, just because I didn't have control over my energy, or didn't have control over my body, and my muscles were very weak. Like I felt that every time I'd go to feed my baby, I couldn't hold her properly, or that she, like the brain sort of manipulated the way I would see things. So every time I'd look at her, I'd be like, oh, she's dying, or I'd killed her, because of the way my brain was seeing her. Everything looked dark, everything was skeletal, so people's faces actually changed and got changed from my brain, the way they looked. The TV was a lot faster, I was hallucinating, everything was like aggressive, I guess, and every movement that I'd see from someone, it would be like they're out to attack me or they're out to hurt me, when that wasn't the case. It's just that the brain was really in overdrive from not sleeping so much. Dark thoughts in a dark place. We're talking about just how powerful the brain is, and like anyone that's experienced mental health, not even in a motherhood capacity, knows just how powerful the brain is and how manipulative it can be, especially when we were talking about things like, you know, I've been open and said that I've had anxiety as well. Not as well, it's very different, but I'm just saying, you know, like rationally, you know that you are for example, we're talking about breathing, you know, rationally you know that you are getting enough oxygen when you're breathing, but your brain's telling you that you're not. And so in a psychosis, it's times a million. And so even though your rational self kind of disappears, because your thoughts are so loud and your thoughts are so overbearing. And we're talking about that, and you kept a journal in the when you were admitted, right? Well, that was the only way I could communicate. I couldn't sit in a room with the doctors and tell them how I was feeling or what was going on. I could only write in a journal and then show them how I was feeling, and they'd have to read my journal for themselves, just because my brain wasn't connecting to my thought, like my speech. So I kept a journal most of the time, and it's amazing to see how the journal first started out completely not making sense at all, just riffraff, like a lot about things that weren't even happening. And then you can see that as this, like I was on antipsychotics during that time as well, that as the brain chemicals start to balance out, you can start seeing that I'm starting to make sense of what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling and how I'm doing things. And I started journaling the times that I was allowed out of the hospital. That started increasing as well. So it only started at 4 hours, and then it increased to 6 hours out with my husband, and then he was able to take me home for a weekend. And that that journal that you can just see that comes through, even the handwriting is like starting to become a lot neater as well. So it's amazing how the brain does work and how we actually see things when we're going through mental health. I was explaining to Aliza that it's like two different worlds. So it's a dark world when you're in there, and everything seems dark, everything seems like death and skeletal. Like I would see grass turning brown. That's just the way the brain would manipulate things. Like there would be paint peeling off walls, and people around me that were saying things, or the voices were really loud as well. So I remember yelling in the hospital going, just be quiet, I just need to read my book. But nothing's actually happening. It's just the way your brain and your head hallucinates and changes your perspective on things. Yeah, absolutely. And could you ever know, oh, that's probably a hallucination because other people aren't acting weird, or no, it felt so real that it did feel, it feels so real that you don't know. And living in a mental hospital, they do lock you in your room for your safety at night. You can get out of your room, but it's locked from the outside in. And they do shine a light in, and they check on you every couple of hours when you're sleeping, just to make sure you're okay. But even that fear of that light coming in, thinking that people were out to get me, I was convinced that all the doctors and nurses were going to kill me. Even though that wasn't happening, they were actually trying to do a lot of good for me.
Yeah. But when someone forcibly also keeps you or makes you have medicine, for example, that feeling of like you don't have any control just only exacerbates that feeling, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then like the doctors and my family knew that I needed medication, but being a nutritionist, I was like, I don't want to take that. But I'm so grateful that I did take it, because it was helping me balance out my brain chemicals and hormones, and being able to bring me back to reality. Really, I was just living in a world that wasn't reality.
We were saying like how important medication is. Like, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, but I don't think that you can come out of a postnatal psychosis without hectic medication, and really like obviously a lot of therapy as well, but medication is, as far as I know, the only way to balance the hormones and the chemicals in your brain that are so out of whack. And it saves your life, right? Like it's
exactly,
literally life-saving.
And that's what it's there for. Like that's how we should see medication, is that it's there for when we are really at our wits' ends. Like natural medicine, I practice in natural medicine all the time, and it's really good for preventing that, so you don't get there. But then once you're there, you do need the medication to actually come back to who you are. And then you can do all the prevention with the natural stuff afterwards. But it's really important that you do have the help during that time if you're experiencing something like that.
100%. And you were saying before, your husband, like, how did he react when he first like found, going from having a healthy wife and a baby who had some issues at birth but was ultimately healthy, to seeing your wife essentially be locked in a room for her own safety? It's a very heavy pill to it's a really hectic thing. So
it was really hard. Obviously I didn't understand this state that he was at when I was going through that. I remember before I was diagnosed, the first words that came out of his mouth was, "You're going psycho, like you're acting psychotic the way you are." Like, this fear is like, and believing in things that aren't really there, and like stuff that's not really happening, that's acting like a psychotic person. Because he was just like, by the end of it, he was so tired of me going, "Oh, what if Poppy's okay? What if she's all right? Like, do we need to do this? Do we need to do that?" Like, it was really exhausting for him, because he wasn't resting. So just because I wasn't resting, he also wasn't resting, because he was having to listen to me being in that fearful state all the time. So I think he was really grateful when we got diagnosed with the psychosis, but during that time it was really hard for him, because he didn't have his wife, or he didn't have a mother there to use that mother instinct to tell him what was happening with the baby. He just had to set his own routine and raise her basically for the first 4 weeks of her life while I was in hospital. And then exhausting, like coming to the hospital and checking in on me all the time, and like being there and not knowing like, where's our marriage go from here, or
will you recover, will you ever get out of here,
will we ever get out of here, like what are we looking for long term? And he did like, my family were very concerned about where I would be long term, like would I come back, or would I be in a mental home for the rest of my life? Will I be able to ever mother Poppy again? But they were pretty sure in the state that I am back to where I am. It just took time, like it took medication, and I'm still recovering now. Like, I still need my 10 hours of sleep at night. I still, but I know my boundaries. I know where I'm at.
You know your triggers as well.
I know my triggers, and I'm on the other side. So it's good. It's good knowing that you can come out of it.
And another thing we were chatting about, which you don't have to talk about if you don't feel comfortable, but what we were saying about like having a second kid. So obviously someone that has had same with, not the same, but some women often feel anxious about their second child if their first birth was horrendous, if it was traumatic, if there was a lot of dramatic things that were around that, especially with mental health. Women who have had really bad postnatal depression, postnatal psychosis, to go back and have another second child is obviously a huge daunting thing. But what when you were saying to me before, like how do you feel about that prospect of having another child, or what would you say to other women who are maybe thinking about that, or thinking,
in your own time, That would be the biggest thing. There's a lot of pressure when your baby hits about 2 or 3. When's the next baby coming along? And we get that a lot. Every barbecue, every party thing that we're at. Oh, when are you going to have another one? Like, oh, you've had Poppy's growing up. She needs a sibling. Yeah. But in your own time is the biggest advice that I could give. And when you feel comfortable in that. So with psychosis, there is a 50 to 70% chance it can happen again. We know that now because we know we've been through it. But with the alarm bells and everything, we know what we're looking for if I was to happen to go back down that pathway. So in having another child, I'm a little bit fearful of being back in that state, but I'm not as fearful because I know that I can do a lot. So I don't go there. So I'm open to taking medication if I have to. Yeah. And we will have a mental health team support us after birth, just to make sure, just to take the precautions that, so we don't get back to where we were and we don't have to go through that again. But I think having another kid, we obviously had that planned. We do want to have more children. Yeah. We're not going to let psychosis be fearful, have the fear for us over that. Yeah.
It's it's amazing. Yeah. Very brave. Yeah. Absolutely. And then with Poppy now, what's your relationship with her? Do you think that the psychosis and being away from her impacted your relationship? Because I know you said now you're really close and she obviously, you can see in all of your videos and things like that, she obviously adores you as her mum, and she obviously has no recollection, she doesn't know what happened, but how do you feel? Do you feel like it impacted your relationship or not really?
In the start, you always worry about that mother-baby bond. So when she was first born, I really, really did try to have as much time as I could. But knowing that I physically wasn't well, I did feel like in the start of my recovery journey, I did have a lot of fear of that. Would it impact her psychologically? Yeah. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Psychologically at the end of the day. But no, she won't have any recollection of that. She was really, really young. I think the only person it impacts, it would be Jake and I, in knowing that we went through that journey with her at such a young age. And we don't want her to think that it was her fault either. Yeah. So we will tell, she'll find out about this. Obviously, maybe she'll watch this video one day. Yeah. But in knowing that she's not the cause of it, it's not nothing you can help. If you've been diagnosed with a mental illness after birth, it's not because you choose to. No. It's an imbalance of brain chemicals that you can't control that. It's just the way it is. Yeah. And some of us are so lucky enough to have that. but it's nothing that is impacting. Now it's we haven't even been through it. It's the way we've recovered so well. We do have times where it's a flashback or we do go back to that, but the relationship I have with Poppy, it's not impacted at all by it. We were able to come out on the other end pretty good, and okay. And when you were inside in the what was it called, the mental institute or no? Yeah, the mental ward.
Mental ward. Yeah. What was a day like? Do you remember, or you were saying it all kind of blurs into one, especially you're on medication. Do you remember things that would happen throughout the day, at regular intervals, or was it more just coping and just surviving while you were in there?
Yeah, it was more of a plan to escape. I just needed to get out, and I didn't know how I was going to do that, but that's what I kept focusing on. So during my journal, I just kept writing the statement of rights, what I had rights to in there, how I felt, what was happening, how could I express myself to the doctor for them to let me out. But it was a Groundhog Day. It would just repeat itself over and over and over again. Yeah. And I'd have interviews with doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and people that were interested in my case and just wanted to study me and diagnose me more, and I had scans and I had ECGs of the brain, and so there was a lot of testing going on during that time to get to my diagnosis where I was. Yeah. And I remember doctor saying, how long do you think you've been here? And I kept saying 3 days, I've been here for 3 days, but then in the reality I'd been there for 3 weeks. So you don't have any recollection of time really. Time all sort of does blend into one. There'd be time, I remember it a lot clear, but then there's times that I wouldn't remember as well. So waking up for breakfast, and you'd have your breakfast, and then you'd do some colouring in and do some activities, and you'd pot around the garden, and then you'd come in and eat again, and then it's just recovery basically. But in your own head, you just basically, I need to survive. I
Yeah.
need to get out of here. I need to go home and be a mother. And
Yeah.
that's all I was focusing on.
Yeah, exactly.
during
You
that
know your baby's there, and you know your baby,
Yeah.
but you just can't get to them at all point at
Yeah.
all time. Like, you know, there's such significant times. Would the doctors ever take your journal and read it, or no?
No, never
that's-
would take off my journal. Take my journal. They would just. I'd have my journal during the interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was good, and they would read it if I opened that to them, which was good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I think
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's all right. No worries.
I'm sure you guys, you can message me or you can message Sara, and you can share your stories. And yeah, exactly as we've just said, like, this is not something that you can help postnatal mental health or even perinatal mental health in any capacity. And so a lot of mums I know feel so much guilt around things like this, and you can't. Exactly. We were saying before, it's like if someone is born with type 1 diabetes, or, you know, they develop something that requires medication like diabetes, that insulin will keep them alive. You can't have guilt associated with that, you know.
Absolutely.
Mental health is just as important as physical health, and it's just as issues can be just as detrimental as any physical health or disease or aspect, anything like that. So
And talk about it.
And talk about it. Yeah.
Definitely talk about it. It's nothing to be ashamed about.
100%.
You know, the more we talk about it,
The better.
the more we can help people, and the more we don't have to go through what I've been through. So it's
Exactly.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.